as designers, we need to be ahead of times and experience all the latest things that are coming up. But at the same time, most of the problems that you will be solving for is not of the metaverse. It's still India and people having issues.
Patience with your team. You have to have patience with your clients. You have to have patience with observing users use your product. When you put it in front of a user and you can see that they're doing it wrong, you have to be patient and let them figure it out. Because if they're not being able to figure it out, that means you did something wrong and you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how you can make the entire app simpler so that users don't get stuck.
Welcome everybody to Career Talks with Mentoria. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us today. The mission of all of these conversations, these talk shows, these webinars are to ensure that each and every one of you can make informed decisions, visualize your future worlds, understand exactly how different kinds of careers work, the good, the bad, as well as the ugly, and then choose the right path for yourselves. Our passion is to help you discover yours, and that's one of the objectives of these webinars. Today, we're going to have an incredible conversation on the world of UX design and building a career in it. We have with us two very, very special guests. We've got Ada Gupta, who's a graduate from St. Xavier's College, and she's the director at RedAlkemi, an exceptional digital marketing agency. We also have Rejo, who's worked with Book My Show, who's worked with Times Prime, MX Player, and is now the director of product design at FanCode. And over the next 45 odd minutes, we're going to talk about how to build a career in the world of UX design, what are the challenges that come in it, and how to ensure that you're being able to pass over those challenges. Ada and Rejo, could you give us a little bit of an introduction of yourselves and your proudest professional moments so far? We can get started with Ada.
Like putting me on the spot immediately. I graduated from St. Xavier's College. I did a bachelor in mass media where I specialized in advertising. During my years at St. Xavier's, I started exploring the world of UI UX a bit more. It was all very new at that time to me, and so you can definitely say that I'm a self-taught designer, and from going through doing things like graphic design for college festivals to slowly working with startups from people who are in college to actually now running my own agency in Chandigarh, where our entire focus is in UX UI design. I think one of my proudest moments in my career is going to have to be the point where I actually figured out how to create an entire web application all on my own. Just reading blogs and watching videos every day, and then bit by bit creating an entire CMS for people to be able to create their own websites easily. So I think, that's got to be one of my proudest moments. That way, I think Mentoria is great because it's helping you guys get in touch with people early on for fields that you might be interested in. I never had that. So yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing. On to Rejo. Rejo, do you want to share your journey, your proudest moments, and give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure, Nagar. Hi guys, my name is Rejo Varghese. I'm currently doing product design with a company called as FanCode. So ended up doing BMM, and it was more like accidental, I would say. Even though I was doing it, I was always interested in the field of design, graphic design to be specific. I used to play around with Photoshop since passing 10th standard and things for college and for church and different places, pro bono work like that. And after graduating, I think BMM for me was doing a lot of projects because my college course was pretty intensive. And during that time, I got exposed to multiple forms of design and also creative fields like video editing and stuff like that. So filmmaking, and also that kind of broadened the horizon. And while doing my BMM course, I also had the opportunity to work with a newspaper, which was DNA back then, and I started my career in that sense then. And post that, I worked with an agency, and that's when I started doing UI of some sorts, because back then apps weren't a big thing. Websites used to be the thing. I figured that, advertising wasn't my scheme of things. So I had a privilege to work with Book My Show with zero, educational background in UX, UI, and, like zero knowledge. With some web design background that I got while working with the agency. And I kind of flipped my entire career, I would say. And yeah, proudest moment, I think I would probably share two. One was shipping my first feature at Book My Show without much knowledge of UI, UX. And in 8 months, I designed and shipped a single feature on my own. And I think that was mine. The second thing, probably a couple of years back when I was working with MX Player, we created it cross-platform in again less than 8 months. So that again was like a proud moment for me.
I want to go back a few years from actually entering the design world professionally to from when I graduated school, actually. When I was graduating school, I had friends around me who were all just like diving into a college program without really understanding what the career choice was that they were making. I, on the other hand, was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do, so I'm going to take a year to figure it out. And I'm so glad that I did that, because in that 1 year, I spent some time traveling. I did a couple of internships. That's when I first visited Bombay, and I ended up interning with NFTC that put together the Film Bazaar every year in Goa. And it's there that I found my love for design. And, when I was just put in front of a computer and they just came up to me and they were just like, we're trying to figure out how to create this layout and stuff like that. And I remember I just picked up a piece of paper and I sketched it all out. And I said, like, look, we could do it this way. And they were just like, this is great. And at that point, it was just like my first or second day at the internship. They were still trying to figure out which department to like put me into. And then once I kind of helped them out with that, they said that, okay, we'll put you in design, and why don't you kind of assist the design team here to, and all they had was an operator. An operator is a person who only knows the software, doesn't really have a design sense. You tell them what you need and you show them show them a reference and they can create it, but they're not creators, they're not creative people. So I had no idea how to use things like Photoshop and InDesign. That's when I first sort of felt like this passion inside me. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be designing things. And that's when I started looking at a lot of design schools. And I decided to go ahead with mass media and get an understanding in advertising, because I wanted to understand the message behind the medium rather than just the medium itself, which is really good. I wouldn't say that my education in advertising did not help me. We studied things like consumer behavior. We studied principles of advertising, human psychology. All of those things really help in UX design. Over a period of time, I figured that, now I've got like this kind of bits of experience across various types of and realms of designing. So it's time to sort of start narrowing it down and pinpoint what part of it really appeals to me. And then I started exploring UX design a bit more. And that's when I designed Felix, which is essentially a content management system that allows users to set up their website in a seamless and quick way without, if you go out to create a website on WordPress, it's going to be overwhelming. There's just a lot of plugins. There's a lot of like jargon out there. There are a million ways to do certain things. We wanted to build a CMS that, you create a website on it, go out, you pick a template, and it was more along the lines of, Wix, for example. So when I created that, that's when I really sort of dove into the world of UX. And now I find myself sitting in Abu Dhabi working with an agency like Mobi World, whom we partner with. They're essentially a software agency who are creating really interesting tech, but they lack the UX aspect of it. So it's really interesting to now, bring that tech to life and put it in users' hands by making it user-friendly and, creating an experience that is impacting a lot of people and is in a lot of people's hands. So to know that you've got an app out there that 1,000 million people are using, that's just, it's a wonderful feeling. So yeah, I'd say those would be my inflection points. The decisions I made before going to college, my realization of, during college, all the internships that I did, coming into RedAlkemi and sort of helping identifying that UX design is where I want to be going. And then coming into then working with larger software companies like MobiWorld, where, you're helping fill their gaps in technology.
I mean, to put it in a single line, right, it would be like making life easier for people, because in the design side of things, when I was doing graphic design, I would make something, put it out, and most of the times, you'll get judged on the number of likes it gets or the views it gets, and that's it, right? You don't know if somebody has actually bought the product or bought a book, or you don't really know if that has caused any feeling in the person's whoever is seeing it in their minds. So there's kind of like a detachment back then. And though we were trying to make creatives out of creatives, or campaigns after campaigns for different clients back then, it was somehow, right, more like you're just chugging out designs, and there was no feedback system to really understand if what you're building is adding value or not, because you make the design, put it out, and you generally, like, the agency would get paid, and then that's done, right? You pick up another client, work on their stuff, and you give them what they need, and then it's over. And so that was kind of not really working out for me. And when I got the chance to work with a product tech company, which is design centered also, that's when it kind of blew up on me that, right, I mean, I can be making things, creating things, and I could see how it impacts people's lives, right? Instead of standing in the queue in front of a movie theater for almost half an hour before the show starts, and not being able to get the right seat, or being going through all that tussle just to watch a movie, was kind of not working out for a lot of people. And to be able to solve that at scale, where people even in a single screen theater sitting in some tier 2 town in Tamil Nadu can easily book a ticket and select the seat that they want, maybe, and also get a discount on it because they're using a certain card or a wallet. I mean, that kind of made me realize this is what I want to do for a long time. Not all my life maybe, but for a longer period of time. That every single day, right, you see the impact that you're creating for the people who use your products. Like, if I put a social media creative, I might get a like, not get a like. I don't care if it's fully working for the brand or not. But here, this is something that I'm making, and every single day on social media platforms, the App Store, Play Store, even in people send emails, this is not working, this is the worst app ever. You'll get to know if what you're building is working for them or not. And I think that is kind of crucial for to keep me motivated to go on doing this. And it keeps evolving. Like, I mean, we used to make simple apps back then, now it's more complicated, and things will get more complex because stepping into a future which we think is going to be all digital.
So what I've got from the both of you is that both of you moved from graphics and social media and marketing design to UX and UI design, primarily because you could see that design wasn't temporary. It wasn't just chugging out more and more material and people just liking it, and it never lasted. But basically, you want to create legacies, to create solutions for people, to impact people's lives on a daily basis rather than at random on digital media basis. And that's why you move to UX and UI design and continue to build and sustain great careers in it. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, I'd say that that's a fair summary. Imagine that you're designing a house and you're the architect. You're the person who's going to sit with the client and figure out what kind of house do they want, how many rooms do they want, who's going to live in it, what kind of lifestyle do you typically live, where do you see the future of this house in 5 years, 10 years from now. Is your son going to live with you, and then is their family going to grow, all of those things. And based on that, you would then go ahead and create sort of like a blueprint for the house, right? You would figure out where the electrical points are going to go, how the plumbing is going to be, making sure the living room is close to the kitchen so that the food is served hot, things like that. So that's in a way what a UX designer would typically do in the context of a website or an application, right? You would figure out who the users are, what kind of information needs to go on the website or the application, what kind of problem needs to be solved, how many steps is it going to take that person to do it, how can we simplify that for the user so that they are able to solve their problem using the application in there. Back to the context of the house, you would hire an interior designer who would tell you, okay, this is the type of door I suggest, this is the color of the walls, this is the type of faucet you should get, maybe these are the type of plugs we should install in there, what the curtains would look like, and so on. Filling a lot of life into the house, you still need to talk to the client of the house to figure all of those things out. And that's where there's a little bit of an overlap between an architect and an interior designer, and on the other side, a UX designer and a UI designer. A UI designer is looking at, what kind of fonts to use, what kind of colors to use, what should the button look like, where should the button be placed so that it's easy for the user to click on it. How does the user know whether when they've clicked on a button, it's worked? Do you use a green color to tell them that yes, this has happened, or do you use a red color to tell them that this there was an error in here? That's the job of the UI designer, to basically bring put skin to the skeleton that the UX person has put together. In a lot of organizations, usually that role is played by one person. That's why you'll see that people are looking for a UI UX designer. And a lot of the times, UI designers graduate up to becoming UX designers. That's the career path one would have. So you need to understand both aspects of it. It's the research part of it as well as the design part of it.
It totally depends on which country you are in, which company you're working in, what size is it, and how much money is at stake. So I think though there are definitions, and I think if you step into the realm of this, you would also come across a lot more things. They would generally, be attending a few meetings maybe to understand this is the largest scope of work, but my bit of this is extremely small. You might be assisting a senior or somebody more experienced than you, and helping them out with their work in a larger organization. But at the same time, if you're in a smaller organization, you would get to jump right in because you are part of like a 2 or 3 member team and you have a lot more things to do. So it depends on actually the context you are in. So I would say that. Your career can go into different tangents, and also since this field in itself is evolving. Like for example, today you would hear the word metaverse thrown around like anything. Like everybody's talking about the metaverse. Facebook has changed its name to Meta, and they are building like this whole AR VR integrated digital world that we're all gonna live in soon, and all of that. And UI UX hasn't been around as long as conventional occupation that people have done. I mean, I started off in 2015, so last 7, 8, 9 years I've been doing this. But I mean, in 5 years time, we might not just have apps the way that we use. We might just be building things for a different platform. It can be augmented reality, it can be virtual reality, and things like that. Respect of what you're building, I think your responsibility obviously grows. So, and along with the responsibility, you can choose, right? There are some people who say, I will just be an individual contributor. So I'm not going to manage teams. I'm not going to look after, lead 30 member teams. I am good at building and that's what I'm going to do. So there are individual contributors who are experts in the field who just do that. And then there are people managers who end up, leading a design team. They'll be creating processes. They'll be doing a lot of design operation, like building design systems, and helping larger teams that are under them to design faster and easier. And if you're in an agency setup, then I think it would be very different, right? Because you work for different clients. Your evolution will be the kind of clients that you will be working for, and how long are you working for.
Between Rejo and I, we can kind of show like what in-house looks like, because Rejo has in-house experience and I have agency experience. So I can talk about it from an agency perspective. I'd say on the agency side, it's also very similar. But the thing in the agency world is that you're going to be a generalist. in the sense that, you get to work across so many industries and so many different projects that every day is very different because you're working on with different clients. So you would get experience in a lot of those. However, even on an agency side, depending on the size of the agency, you can get into a niche or specialization. You could go like, I'm only going to be a UX writer. I'm only going to write, or I'm only going to be a UX researcher. I'm only going to do user testing. So you can go into specializations as well within an agency side as well, depending on the size of the agency. If your agency is huge, you've got offices across the world, then you could get into that kind of a specialization. I think there are 4 key things that you should keep in mind. First is that you should always be curious. You should be questioning everything and just look at the entire world as this is the first time that you're seeing it. Second, I would say is reading. That's very, very important, that you get into the habit of becoming a good reader. Technology is constantly evolving. You need to get into the habit of reading about those new technologies and new tools that are out there. Continuous learning, which is the third point, where you need to make sure that you're keeping yourself on your toes and you're continuously learning about the new technologies that's coming out. Next would be communication skills. It's very important that you're being able to communicate the design decisions that you've taken and be able to explain the logic to your team, to your clients about why you've taken a certain decision. Lastly, patience. Patience with your team. You have to have patience with your clients. You have to have patience with observing users use your product. When you put it in front of a user and you can see that they're doing it wrong, you have to be patient and let them figure it out. Because if they're not being able to figure it out, that means you did something wrong and you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how you can make the entire app simpler so that users don't get stuck. When it comes to skills, I think one of the most important skills is to build a habit of always taking notes. You need to be taking notes in meetings. You need to be taking notes when you're observing users use your product. You need to be taking notes, especially when you're with clients and they're explaining their vision to you. Listening is another important thing, not just to your clients or your users, but to your team as well, especially when you're working with developers, because they are the ones who are going to be explaining the tech to you. The ability to think about the worst case scenario and the ability to think like a stupid person, because rest assured there's going to be a stupid person trying to use your application and you're designing for that stupid person. And being able to think about the worst case scenario is also important, because you're not just designing for the happy path that everybody's going to be successfully be able to put products in their cart and check out. There are going to be, you have to think about the scenarios where things go wrong, and that's what kind of separates an okay UX designer from a brilliant one. There are some things in design that are just done a certain way. It's tried and it's tested. The sooner you learn that that's how things are, the faster you'll grow, and those will also help you present your ideas and articulate your design decisions better. For someone who does not have a degree in UX design, so to speak, all of my learning has been online. So I've actually, have to consciously take out the time to, okay, today I'm going to read and research on this piece of technology, or I'm going to figure out how to use this new tool, or let's kind of just, put together a small app and experiment with it a little bit. Habit of experimenting and curiosity is what's going to keep you on your toes and make sure that, you're keeping up with the times.
As designers, we need to be ahead of times and experience all the latest things that are coming up. But at the same time, most of the problems that you will be solving for is not of the metaverse. It's still India and people having issues, struggling to put a debit card and still not transacting online. Technically, there are two things, right? One is to understand technologies that are being used. When you use an app, it runs on some software, right? It runs on some code. So that's one part of it. The other thing is, how do you make designs, right? Those are softwares that helps you design interfaces, which will eventually be coded and, will become an app and you reach the users phone or a laptop or something. And there is a lot of, I would say, technicalities related to this, because you need to know what kind of devices are you designing for. You can be making for a phone or a watch or a TV, or you can maybe making it for a billboard or something like that. The size of the device kind of ranges right now. Or like if you think of the future, AR and VR is like another ball game, right? You have like a 360-degree screen around you. So that's a different, the way you code kind of changes frequently, because your OS is controlled by multinational giants who decide how apps should function, which phones you should be using, and all of that. So understanding the new limitations or the new specifications that they set is also really important.
Understanding that limitation of the technology that you're working within is very important. It's very easy to get carried away and create beautiful designs, which then when you show to your development team, they just turn around and say that this is not feasible, it cannot be created. So it's very important that in the beginning you kind of sit with your development team and understand, what are the limitations that we're working with. Watch a couple of videos on how HTML CSS works. That's the one of the most basic things, because at the end of the day, almost everything that's being rendered visually is being rendered in HTML and CSS. So getting a basic understanding of that would be great. The way I like to be able to learn tools is to just open up a new tool like Figma or something and click on every single menu to see what it does. It's not just about the end users, but it's also about like the developers who are going to be looking at or referring to your design to create it, and it should be easy for them also. So make sure that you're creating your designs in the correct manner and not taking shortcuts there. It's very important to first understand what type of organization it is, right? Because like there's agency side and then there's in-house. Then you kind of go into the product side or the marketing side of that product. If you like variety and you get bored quickly, then an agency might be for you, because no one day is the same. You're constantly working on the multiple types of projects. They will be across various industries. You will definitely get a lot of experience. And I personally think starting out in an agency will give you an exposure to a lot of agencies before you sort of move in-house. When you're in-house, it's a lot about focus and deep thinking on one particular problem to kind of bring it to perfection. The role of the UX designer is to bridge the gap between those two things. You have to make the effort to understand the other side, and that will help you perform your role well.
Yeah, it's about constantly monitoring how things that you're shipping out is doing. If people like it, don't like it, how are they responding? Are they using it, not using it? If they are using it, then great, what more new things can we add? If they're not using it, then figuring out why they're not using it. What should I do to make them use it? There are new problems that keep popping up. You just make sure that whatever you're working on keeps performing better, because that's the end goal. Like something like an Amazon will not be experimenting a lot. They know something is working and let's not spoil that. So they will mostly be doing the same thing and trying to better that in a way. But again, if you're somebody who gets bored of the same thing every single day, an agency might be in your scheme of things.
It's important to go and get an education, obviously, because UX is such a new sort of space. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get one specifically in UX. Nothing beats real world experience. Getting an education is different from getting a degree. So keep that in mind. If you choose not to get a degree in UX design, you still have to make the effort to educate yourself through reading, through following thought leaders, doing online courses, experimenting, and finding a mentor whom you can run these things by. Doing a lot of internships could help. You need to still make the effort to educate yourself. It's not necessary that you do it through a degree.
It's like shopping online and shopping offline. To shop offline, you need to go, dress up to a certain level, go out, go to that place and then pick up those things physically one by one and go and see, check out and come back and carry all that home. Or you can just shop online, right? Like you just sit at home and or add to cart things that you want, and it gets delivered. If something is wrong, they'll take care of it. So it's like that. I think there's no right or wrong. If you don't have an education, that's not wrong. Today there is multiple options that you can get all of that learning in 3 years and get a degree attached to it, and then you can focus on getting an internship and stuff like that. No harm in that also. It again depends on how do you want to do it. If you want to bootstrap and get things done by yourself, you want to do the entire process manually.
Getting a degree does give you an early head start, that there's no denying that, but at the end of the day, it's your smarts that are going to sustain you. But because this field is constantly evolving, the things that you learn in your degree could very soon be void.
Syllabuses don't change as fast as things change.
In India, I know that IIT, NID, and MIT are some institutes that offer some sort of course on human-computer interaction or designing for experiences and so on. The name of the courses will always change. The degree that you get could be a science degree or an arts degree, depending on whether they're looking at it from a technical perspective or from a design perspective. I think what's important is to take a look at the course material and really sort of read through what it is that they're going to be teaching you. So you don't just want to cover design, but you should also go for courses that cover research, psychology, business, and communication skills. You want to go for something that is covering that entire spectrum.
Also look at the kind of practical, how much time do they spend doing practical work, because a lot of these courses would have a lot of studio work, which is basically doing internships at different places. The IDF, Interaction Design Federation, which has, I think that's a very value for money thing. For I think a small subscription per year, they give you unlimited access to all their courses. And again, do it at your own pace thing. So you take one thing and figure it out, and they've divided into levels. That is kind of interesting.
There are some really good conferences that you can attend to get international exposure. Design Up, who do conferences in India. Designers from even Google, Airbnb, Uber come in and give talks on how they've been designing, and that's great for getting international exposure if you don't have the ability to actually buy a ticket and fly out. There is a gap between the kind of technology and teachings that are there in let's say the US or the UK versus what's being taught in India. But at the same time, because India's in a very interesting space in terms of tech, the startup culture here, the way that it's growing, this is where there is a lot of scope and opportunity to solve problems and really push yourself in terms of user experience. In the US or the UK, it's a lot like now they're kind of trying to come up with problems to solve because they've just solved all the problems out there. Whereas in India, you have such a diverse. Maybe take a look at boot camps. If you want to get international exposure, do like a 4-week boot camp somewhere. IDEO has a boot camp. I know Stanford has a boot camp. Those are some that you could explore. You don't need to apply, as in you don't need to be accepted in it. Anybody can go in and do a boot camp. So if you want to get international exposure, that's where I'd look, but it's not necessary. And there are a lot of conferences within India itself that will help you get that international exposure if you want.
Landing a job is much, much, much easier in India than anywhere else right now. And obviously there's a huge pay difference and all of that, but ignoring all of that, getting a job, like if you're starting up, is much easier.
One of the key things to include in your portfolio is to show the process and the learnings. What you do as a UX designer is implement a process throughout. It's a step-by-step process that you implement. You'd start out by doing a little bit of research. You define the problem. You would then ideate and come up with a solution, and then you would build one of those solutions and test them and see what your learnings have been. That's your typical UX process. A graphic designer's portfolio, for example, would just be like, here are a bunch of designs that I have created. Whereas a UX designer's portfolio would need to be that this is the problem we identified, this is the user who was facing that problem, and this is how we research them, this is their pain points, and so on. So you have to show your work and keep your portfolio focused. Don't try and because it's when you start out in design, you'll do a little bit of graphic design, you'll do a little bit of video editing, you'll do a little bit of social media posts and print, maybe like branding, and then don't mix it all up in your UX portfolio. Keep it focused on your UX portfolio, because that's the job that you're applying for.
The question that comes up is, how do I make a portfolio, because I've not worked on real projects. People are learning on their own, right? They have absolutely nothing to show. We are all smartphone users. We use tons of apps every day. So just pick out your top 2 or 3 apps that you will really like, and just maybe make a list of issues that you face, right? It can be something on WhatsApp or something on Flipkart, anything, right? We use all of these common apps every day, on Instagram or anything. Just pick out that maybe 2 or 3 problems that you find that are annoying to you, and just try to see with the learnings that you've had, right? With the kind of principles that you have learned, try to apply those things and try to solve those problems in your life. Because these are real apps having real issues. You might be a user, you might just be facing it, but still it's a problem. And try to solve that, and then explain how you did it. And that can be a way to put together a case study without having worked on a real project. They want to see how you think, whether you try to solve any problem. Even identifying problem requires skill, and that thinking, right, and that kind of will set you apart. And I think practice a lot. I think that's the biggest thing, right?
This is what we typically call a wireframe, where you very roughly put together, what elements will go on the page and in what area will those elements go. And so you're building a skeleton of what that web page is going to look like. You then go in and you build out a style tile. So this is typically what a UI designer would be doing, is to put together, these are the colors we'll use, these are the types of images we'll use, this is what buttons will look like, these are what my icons will look like, this is what a heading will look like, and so on. Again, this is like one of the very first portfolio pieces I created, guys. I think the key takeaway from this is to showcase your entire process. Maybe put in a bit more text in there about what the challenge was, and a little bit more about, what you learned about the user. I think those were things that were missing when I first created this. So looking back, that's something that I would possibly include. I think the first thing you should probably do is aim to go on the agency side rather than in-house, because typically in-house they expect you to have at least some experience. The beauty of working on the agency side is that you'll get a lot of exposure and experience across a lot of things, and that will help you identify faster what you enjoy doing, and therefore start focusing more on that aspect of it. I think when you're starting out, just take any work that comes your way to be able to build a portfolio. When you're starting out and you're doing an internship, you have to put in the work. You're going to be a foot soldier. You're not going to be able to make big design decisions. There's going to be a designer above you who says that this is what I need, and so it's definitely going to be more focused on the UI side of things before you pay your dues and then get the privilege to make design decisions that affect the business. First of all, if you are really looking for an internship, reach out to me. I'll give you one. One thing that I kind of experimented with was to actually go on websites, and if I come across a business that I happen to see their website and their website's not great, I reach out to them and saying that, maybe it's time you look at the UI of your website. It's not looking very good, and I'd like to be able to help you, and be honest. Like, don't try and pretend that you have experience that you don't. So just say that, I'm learning, I want to experiment, and your website's shit anyway, so what do you have to lose? It is a lot of, just putting yourself out there on different platforms and so on.
Show off your work, right? Show off your process, talk about your journey. And once you are consistent in reaching out, showing off your work, talking to people, and that somehow lands you opportunities which nobody would come across. There's no known data of it, right? If you go on Glassdoor or LinkedIn for that matter, you would get a range which is there internationally. In US and UK and Europe and other places. But in India, we have a huge pay disparity, right? You can get engineers for 10,000 a month, or you can get engineers for say 10 lakhs a month, right? That's the disparity that we have. There are no set standards. Different companies pay at different scales. And it also depends on the value that they think that you will bring to the table. Depends on the kind of companies you're working for, because it's not just the take-home salary, right? Because you're working in tech products companies and startups, there's a lot of equity angle to it also. So it's not just the salary that you get, it's also the ESOPs that you get. And that in India, right, a lot of companies get acquired, sold off, and things like that. People earn a lot of money from that too, because they're now part of that ecosystem in a way. So this is not a government job. This is, it's as stable as, like the stock market for that matter, right? If your company is doing well, if what you're designing is able to generate revenue eventually, that kind of works. Otherwise, it's totally depend. Like COVID really hurt a lot of these tech companies because the business models weren't good enough to sustain during such a pandemic. So, nobody had planned for it. So it's like totally depending on a lot of multiple factors.
There are a couple of factors to keep in mind when it comes, because that affect your salary. It's the size of the organization, the type of the organization, whether that's agency or in-house or startup, and the city that you're based in. A metropolitan city like Mumbai or Bangalore or Delhi would definitely have higher starting salaries than, let's say, a Chandigarh or a Pune. There's a lot to learn, and you will be pulled in all directions. And some days you would be like, oh my God, I can't do this. But you just have to, keep calm and just say to yourself, this too shall pass. Every now and then you will come across a client that says, you'll face criticism, and they'll say that this is obvious, or this is basic, or, you should be, this is rudimentary. So for that, I think one of the key ways to solve that challenge would be to get into the habit of researching, of questioning everything, and of understanding how things really work. Because of the industry being the way that it is and the different ways that it's structured, there are a lot of labels out there. You could be a product designer, a UI designer, a UX designer. You could be a visual designer who's expected to do a little bit of product. So make sure that you read the job titles, the job descriptions, because there's a lot of overlap in the titles itself. It is a lot to keep up with. So you have to always constantly have that curiosity and that discipline to keep educating yourself and learning.
More on the ethics side of things is that even though we're all solving problems, at the end of the day, all our goal is to make money. It's a business at the end of the day. So you need to be making money for your product or your platform. And you would have to take calls that might just not always be ethically correct in a way. So
thanks a ton for sharing that, Ada and Rejo. We're now going to open the floor to audience questions.
Right now, on-campus placements are starting my college, so I'm getting more thinking about how it will be more difficult to get off-campus placement in UX design, because I really like this field as a UX designer. But certainly that thought is also coming even for the internships, even for getting my first internship is for unpaid, and for getting that I have to apply for so many so many portals and so many companies. I'm just worried for on-campus internships I have to make so much efforts and it's not guaranteed. So how would my off-campus placement would be? Like you used, as Rejo said, that for Google also for a fresher it is very difficult. So even if I think I have good skill, I am ready to work hard and upskill them, but how to reach those organizations and how to get good placement?
There are tons of opportunities, but it's just that getting them or getting someone's attention is difficult, and that requires a lot of work. Again, like I said right before, you need to be constantly reaching out to as many people as you can. Right, you already have one option now, Ada is willing to offer internships. But again, right, if you think about it, you attending this workshop, you already have one opportunity lined up in front of you, potential opportunity. Imagine going ahead and just talking, just sending your work or whatever you have done so far and just talking to people. I think that will open up a lot more. So it's not easy, but you need to be persistent with it. It's not easy. I mean, though there are tons of opportunities.
I'd agree it's not easy because sometimes they're just looking for something really specific. There are two things here. One is to constantly build your portfolio, which even when you're on campus, you should be doing. And the second is to continuously reach out. But when you're reaching out, don't just send mass emails to organizations. Put in effort to curate whom you're applying to, because their company culture should resonate with you. And take the time to actually sit and write that proper email after having researched something about that organization. Building your portfolio carefully and then reaching out to people carefully.
Do I need to basically be from do coding and then go to UX design, or would it be more preferable if I went from a graphic designer to a UX designer?
I've seen people who start out as graphic designers and then move into UI UX, and I've seen people who start out as coding HTML CSS front-end developers who then move into UI UX. The key thing is not so much whether you're from a technical background or from a design background. It's more about being able to understand human psychology, being able to empathize with the user, and being able to solve problems for them. There's no thing that, okay, no, I have to first do graphic design and only then I can go into it, or I have to do coding and only then I can get into it. There's no such thing.
I just wanted to understand, what courses and websites would you recommend for transiting the UX? So I've been researching about UX a lot, and I've come across great websites, but I'm not too sure with respect to resources like books and websites, what is concrete and credible. So could you just help me out with that?
Absolutely. I actually have a list out here that I was going to send to everyone. Don't Make Me Think is one of the key UX books that you should be reading. It's all about how you are simplifying the design so that the end goal is to not make the user think. If the user is coming onto your application and they have to think about the next step, that means you failed at your role. In terms of communication influence, The Psychology of Persuasion is a great book to understand how the human mind works and how people make decisions. And being able to translate that into apps is a skill that is worth putting your time into.
Just want to ask that what's the relevance of UX designing for BCom graduates?
The digital world has scope for everything, right? And if you are interested, and if you probably train yourself to be a UX designer, then it will be easier for you to understand that spectrum of things, right? Like, for example, I've never worked on a finance, a pure finance app. But for me, if I were to, it would take me a lot more time to figure how things function. And I think you would get a head start on it better than me, for that matter. So I think any kind of knowledge, right? Any kind of knowledge is good if you are in this field, because you'll be working on a wide, your touch points of fields would be very different. Any and all information is always good. Like, I don't follow football, but I'm learning now how the fundamentals and all work, because now I have to design for a football audience. You have to, in a way, be open to exploring new things. So your BCom would not be a waste. Like, it will always be helpful to, if you were to work in that, in a finance side of thing, and there are plenty of startups and companies doing that. So I think Mentoria really helps people to understand what they are, born to do in a way. So I think figuring that out and choosing the right niche is important.
Thank you so much, Ada and Rejo, for these absolutely incredible insights. I'm sure that any person wanting to build a career in UX design would have seen a lot of value with these experiences and these thoughts and these real world examples. To all of you watching Career Talks with Mentoria, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us here today. We hope we've been able to give you a deeper understanding of how you build a career in UX design. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us on mentoria.com. Feel free to call our career helpline, visit the website. And if either of you are still unsure about what you want to do and whether you want to get into UX design or not, please ensure that you call up the career helpline.
Thank you, Nika.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.